when we think about uniformity, Jason, one of the first things that come to mind is obviously getting chicks off to a good start, through breeding practices. Bird health is another one. It all revolves around nutrient utilization. So if we don't have a healthy flock at placement, then certainly they're not being able to utilize their nutrients.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Poultry Podcast. My name is Jason Emmert, and today we're happy to welcome back to the podcast Dr. William Dozier, who is a professor and extension specialist in the Poultry Science Department at Auburn University. For those who might have missed our previous podcast with Dr. Dozier, he received his bachelor's degree and PhD from Auburn with a master's degree from the University of Kentucky. He previously served as department head of poultry science at Auburn and was formerly a research animal scientist with USDA ARS. Dr. Dozier's research focuses on defining nutritional needs of broilers with a particular emphasis on amino acids and energy, as well as the use of enzymes and alternative ingredients. But he's also got a lot of field experience with birds, and in particular today we're going to talk a little bit more about pullets and uniformity and get into the broiler breeder side a little bit, which I'm looking forward to. But Dr. Dozier, welcome back to the Poultry Podcast.
Thank you, Jason. Really glad to be back and really excited about sharing some information today on what I see out in the field. So
great. Well, we're looking forward to that. But to get us started, especially if people happen to miss the previous podcast, could you fill us in just a little bit about your academic journey and how you ended up where you are today?
Okay. Sounds good. I finished my PhD at Auburn University in poultry science, and then upon graduation accepted an extension role with the University of Georgia for almost 4 years there. So was able to get out to the field and work hands-on in commercial production, and then moved on to ARS, USDA, where did nutrition research as well as environmental management. Research as well there. And then from there, came to Auburn in a research teaching position and focused primarily in poultry nutrition, and did that. And that was in 2008, and then moved into a department head role in 2019. And now in 2024, I've transitioned back down to the department and have a 75% extension role. So, and really work with the broiler integrators across the state of Alabama and growers, and as well as have a small research appointment, about 25%. So.
Great. Yeah. There's, at least this is my opinion, there's something special about extension. And I don't know if you share that, but tell us a little bit about what is appealing about extension to you. What do you like about it?
Being able to make a difference in people's lives and being, out on a farm one-on-one with a producer or service tech and be able to educate them and and just being able, every time's new to me, as well as passing on information to those, but also out in the field, I see something different and I get educated as well on new topics. And so it's just a nice continuum.
Yeah, and you've been in the classroom plenty in your career. I think there's a lot of similarities in some ways with teaching and extension, but extension, as you mentioned, it has that added component of everything you can learn. Now, I've learned a lot through teaching, but it's a little different. It's not so much of a dialogue all the time as we would like it to be. But do you find that it also has kind of a strong teaching feel to it?
I do. It has a strong teaching, but also the other side that's very, very interesting to me is being able to see changes that are happening with, with food service and how that's impacting what we're doing on the farm. And, we went through this NAE, and now you're seeing a little transition, a little different now, back into ionophores. And so certainly I think that's going to change on maybe how we do business in the future as well. So, but just the overall impact that it actually has on our daily lives. We all go to restaurants and like to eat chicken, but it all starts right there on the farm. And being able to see that go forwards as well as seeing it, go back through sales and down to processing the live side too is neat too to me. Being able to put all this together. So.
Yeah, the whole system is fascinating.
It is very, very fascinating, particularly on product mix and where different products are going in our industry. It's just totally fascinating to me and how it impacts all of our lives.
And you mentioned that, kind of the NAE approach, and then that's shifting a little bit. And hopefully, and I mean, you could comment on this as much or as little as you wanted to, but hopefully we've learned not just something about birds through all of that, but something about that process and the way that went. But
certainly we've seen a lot, in terms of early mortality and stuff like that out in the field. And but I really like this new approach we're going to. I think we're going to like it moving forward. So
sometimes it's a bit of a windy road to get to where we want to go, but the destination's important.
And there's a lot of challenges, and we poultry industry has met them and have done well, and we have operations that grow birds very well on an NAE program. And I think it's really showed us some opportunities improving production. So
probably learned that we can do some things that 40, 50 years ago we would have not thought possible.
That's correct.
Yep.
Working with nature and not against it. Chickens fed AX3 Digest consume significantly less feed and water to produce 1 pound of meat. Successful flock performance is determined during the first 10 days post-placement. AX3 Digest is a highly digestible novel protein that most improved in barn performance, bird health, and a drier litter. For more information, visit www.protecta.com.
Well, let's get into the broiler breeder side a little bit. And in particular, I think you're seeing some things in the field with Pullet Uniformity. And let's just start there.
Well, in terms of the broiler industry, one of our biggest opportunities is hatchability. Now we're around the 79% average for the industry, where back wasn't that long ago we were assuming we'd be at 84 or so. So, when we drop hatch like that, it certainly impacts the number of broilers that can be placed on a shackle in the processing plant. So that really gets a lot of attention in terms of profitability and so forth. Then, we really think about life of flock fertility. It really starts with managing pullets and cockerels, and to maintain, really that target body weight and rearing. And we want to continue that, our target body weights all the way through lay. But obviously, if we don't achieve these in rearing, it's going to be more difficult to achieve these during the lay cycle. And, underweight birds during rearing, once we move them into the lay house, they typically do not respond as well to light stimulation. So you've got an impact on sexual synchronization of the flock. So, and what impacts this has is that this could delay reproductive performance early in lay. So, all of this, a lot of times, often starts back to how we rear pullets, and lower body weight hens, they have lower egg weights. We do see increased embryonic early mortality the first 3 days in the hatchery at the hatchery. So certainly that gives us some problems as well. So it's just good management practice to be able to meet these target body weights. It's really essential to having a flock that's very productive over the life of, from 40 to 60, from 20 to 65 weeks, that 40-week period there. So it all starts that first 20 weeks of age of getting these birds off to a good start, maintaining that target weight, and minimizing that variability. And we typically measure variability, as you know, with the coefficient of variation on body weight. Mm-hmm. Also, another metric is used is evenness, or like within 10 plus or minus 10% of that average weight. So, in terms of goal of uniformity, obviously we'd like to see pullets in that 12 to 13% range, but there are times where I've seen flocks are 16, 17% CVs. So, and, we may see in terms of percent uniformity down, high 60%. So obviously we'd like to see them mid to high or 70s. So there are some opportunities that certainly we have with uniformity. And when we think about uniformity, Jason, one of the first things that come to mind is obviously getting chicks off to a good start, through breeding practices. But bird health is another one. It all revolves around nutrient utilization. So if we don't have a healthy flock at placement, then certainly they're not being able to utilize their nutrients. That's a big one. Because of the demand on with some of our primary breeding stock now that we often see on a farm, you could see 8 or 9 or 10 different sources of where these chicks came from. Wow. So different flocks. So if you've got 9 or 10 placed on a farm, so you've got a wide age variation of where they came from these different flocks. So that certainly adds to uniformity issues, but also not having access to feed on a uniform basis, to me is an area that I see that it really kind of does contribute to this. One being feeder space, and the second one being feed distribution, and there are certainly some challenges there. So that's some of the things a couple of things I'd like to talk about today. So yeah, great. I can imagine if hatchability is down a little bit, is there a temptation then to increase the bird density just a bit in the house to try to end up with the same number of, and if you have any feeder space issues or feed availability issues, that increased density, I would think, would not help. Well, and one thing that's happened too, along with that, good point you made there with increased density, as we have seen some, pullet mortality has increased, over the last probably 18 months. We've seen some challenges there, and it could be coccidiosis, could be a lot of different things that have caused this mortality. But then it gives the temptation to place more chicks if you think you might lose, at your 7-day, 2.5%. So you end up placing more. And then you really get the feeder space out of line as well as stock and density. On pullets, we'd like to see 1.4 to 1.6, square foot per bird. But, oftentimes you may see below that number. With males, cockerels we'll see anywhere from 2 to 4. So a big spread there. And certainly if we don't have enough space for these birds, then that transitions over into feeder space issues. And, as these birds, feeder space requirements, they differ with respect to age. And so even at, say, out at 17, 18 weeks on some of these flocks, you may see 15 birds per pan if you're on a pan system, where really they probably need to be around 11 or so, and that can, or 12. So that really can create some uniformity issues and target body weights. And I do think brooding is very much really, we've got to really focus on that, getting these chicks off to a good start by week 3 or so, having good uniformity to start with, during that starter period. I think it's very, very much essential.
Right. You mentioned, you may have birds coming in from several different locations. Mm-hmm. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, so there's certainly factors you can't control.
Right.
Right. But that makes it so much more important to very carefully control the factors that you can.
That you can.
To
me, one of the first places I think we really need to, look with, particularly with these feed allocation programs that we give with pullets, because eventually they'll go on a skip a day or 4-3 and then transition into a 5-2 late, is, something very simple, is just calibrating the scales at the bin. We need to know, exactly that we're distributing that feed system is this amount of feed to these pullets on this day. And I think that's very, very important. And that's something that could be overlooked, but routinely, I think it's, very much a good idea to calibrate those scales, at that bin level. Because on a given day, we may be feeding like 3,500 pounds of feed in a particular house. So certainly we need to make sure that we're hitting that target. So
yes,
I think that's very, very, very much important. So
right.
Of course, in terms of feeder space on a pan line, we've had some operations or to have added an additional feeder line to reduce the number of birds per pan. That's helped. On a chain system, we can add an additional hopper or additional loop to help with that if need be. I think moving forward, I think it's going to be very important to really think through our, on our construction side, what we want to do to meet these needs of these birds, because we're really going to focus more and more on yield. These broilers are being very efficient out in the field. Our yields are very good, and it's only going to continue. And I think these appetites on these pullets they're going to only grow. And certainly the time that feed's out there, their cleanup time is very, very quick. We need to have a feed system that can deliver this, say, with less than 3 minutes, whether we're in a pan system, chain system. And like to be able to turn, feed these birds a few minutes prior to the lights coming on. As you know, pullets are on an 8-hour light, 16-hour dark type cycle. So they get trained to, when they start hearing the feeder system coming on, that feed is coming. But it's very, very essential that we have all the feed distributed from one to both ends of the house in a very uniform manner, and so that all birds have access to the feed. And there are some differences that we do encounter on, I think both a chain system, feeder system, or pan system works well. There's obviously some differences, and people have a lot of different opinions on which is best. But, we had a lot of success in the past on a chain system that was, operating on about 60 feet per minute, and these were shorter houses, say like a 36 by 300. Well, these,
right.
And that's what I would call a slower chain speed, whereas in a 40 by 500, we need to be at chain speeds of 90 to 100. So where we can deliver that feed in a timely manner.
Oh, I was going to say, could there ever be a case made for maybe additional hoppers, shorter feed lines coming in from,
you could
from multiple points?
Add an additional hopper in and try to have enough feed that it could take care of half of a loop or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. One of the advantages of a vertically integrated system should be that you can do things that economically might not look like they make sense at one stage, because it's going to make such big improvements at a different part of production.
Yeah.
But I still think when push comes to shove, that can be difficult to do.
Yeah, no, it is. It's all about cost, and it's on somebody's farm. So,
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. And, the downside on some of these chain systems has always been that if you have openings on the end or in the turns, the chicks can get hung up, and then you've got some chick mortality, with that.
Right.
So we've seen a big push on pans, and with the pan system, certainly the advantage is you don't have, that equipment associated with mortality. You may have some getting in that's got grills in it, and they may die there. So we're seeing some, new products come out that are grillless type pans that are very appealing. But the pan system, the challenge that we see with that is just equipment operating correctly. So, that those lines need to be charged so that the end of the pans on both ends of the house, they need to have adequate amount of feed in them. And you can have feed line motor stripping. You can have proximity switches not working properly. I mean, you may have a house that could have as much as 20 of these proximity switches. And so you could have failure on equipment, and that's always, challenge, just to make sure of that. And one thing I've noticed is, that, growers may have a tendency, they'll turn the feed system on and make sure it's going. Then they're going to the next house if I've got, say, like 4 pullet houses. But I think it's very important to make sure and check both ends of that house to make sure those lines are charged. And, we all, human nature, get in a hurry and want to go to the next house. But these houses need to be charged on both ends. I think that's extremely important. So, that's one thing I see with the pans is just the overall equipment needing to work properly. But, any of these, you've got feed line being charged with one system, or the other system, we've got a slow chain speed, that sort of thing, that can give us some feed distribution problems. And, I really see the need for more fiber in some of these diets, that we can get more volume of feed distributed from one end of the house to the other. And so, that makes sense. And charging the line, I think it's such a good point, because, if you're a bird and you're at a pan that's not getting feed, it reminds me of Next Level Chef. You got about 5 seconds to pick what you need. It's not quite that short, but you don't have a lot of time to be finding time in a pullet house. These appetites are so aggressive now that and we're having to, they're just not provided the nutrients that, to optimize body weight, because that's not our objective. Our objective is to maintain these target body weights to optimize reproductive performance. But their progeny are, selected to have these aggressive appetites and good feed conversion, good yield, but it also goes the other scenario back on the reproductive performance. So there's always a balance and so forth.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I think feeder space is so interesting because it's so tempting to just count pans. Well, I got enough space. But then do you ever see issues coming into play like ventilation? Maybe there's a part of the house that's poorly ventilated. You have dead spots, or there's anything creating a situation where that's not where a bird wants to be.
If we don't have enough fans running with pullets, like during feeding, you can see them going into, you can see pullets choking, and they're just getting overheated, and so you got to have enough airflow on these pullets for that. I mean, but just. So that's one thing that you may see as well. You'll see, bent board strings break, and just a lot of that myriad of things with ventilation. But ventilation has a big deal, impacting performance, and particularly on the late cycle about cleanup time, and even in the afternoons about when your mating is going to increase. Certainly, as we go into this hotter weather that's coming up upon us, then certainly we need to keep these birds cool for that. But but yeah, I think we get into a scenario where we may look at going back to feeder space. We maybe look at stocking density and maybe not pay enough attention to feeder space and number of birds per feeder, because as these birds get from 17 approaching 20 weeks of age, certainly that changes. And I really question, Jason, if we've got enough space between pans at oftentimes. So you may only have from lip to lip, if we're on a straight line system with pans, there only maybe like 13 inches between them. Well, if you've got one bird eating in one pan, it's taking up it may take up a hole on the back end of the bird of that other pan, adjacent pan.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
But it gets, housing and getting enough birds in there and so forth. But I think those are some things that we can really look at in terms of trying to improve uniformity, is ensuring that we've got adequate feeder space. Also, just some of the challenges I've mentioned about feed distribution and making sure that our equipment is working properly and getting that feed evenly distributed throughout that house.
Yeah, and we also have to rely on feed quality to some extent, I would imagine, to be able to handle higher distribution speed. And
as you know, birds are creatures of habit, and just as much, differences in crumble quality, particularly we see this in the late house, that can have a big impact on feed intake with hens. Well, and with hens, the slat area is probably about an 8-degree temperature differential than in the floor. So having enough airspeed and air velocity on those birds too is very, very important on cleanup time. So
I wanted to go back to something you said a minute ago. You were talking about the space between pans.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really good point. It reminds me of, you can walk into a restaurant and you look at the tables. You see how many chairs they have, but you already know, I can't sit there. There's no room for the person at the table behind me.
Right.
But there's no substitute for being in that house and watching the birds eat and just actually observing that behavior so you can pick up on some of these things.
Yeah, that's what I really like. We've had some houses in our state that's moved to from a 4-line pan system to a 5-line pan system. So just providing more feeder space. But we have to be careful of not going too far the other direction with too much feeder space, because birds will, they can overconsume and get heavier and mess uniformity up, the other way too. So,
that's right. Yeah, that's another good point, because if you're at a pan that's pretty crowded and that gets finished up, now you're visiting other pans that are less crowded, and that feed per bird could get messed up in a hurry.
It's helped out on some of these houses going from a 4-line system to a 5-line system in terms of reducing number of birds per pan. I've seen in certain houses where we've gone from 15, 16 birds per pan, down to about 12 birds per pan. So just adding that additional line. So that's I feel like a big improvement.
Yeah. Now, you kind of started off talking about the situation of underweight when you're moving those into the breeder house. I'm guessing, to what extent is that something which you're really not ever going to completely recover from? I mean, you could bring the birds up to weight, but I assume that time you're losing at the beginning with maximizing production is lost time.
Yeah, but as you know, dealing with on a research farm, that a given population, they may have an average target weight, but they're still going to be bottom end birds. So one, I guess, strategy that some operations may use is they may bring birds into the lay house about 20 points over in terms of pounds over their target, with the assumption that they are going to have that spread. And those low end birds, there won't be so many of those that are going to be below the target weight. But it's never a good fix for that. Is we're dealing with biological variability, and you can have an average of in terms of 3 and have a 2 and a 4 pound that have a large spread, but it still has the same average as another group that has the same average weight but has a much tighter. And that's what we're trying to do, is just minimize that variability, and so that when they go into the lay house, that we can really start optimizing egg production early.
Does that variability have an impact then later on mating behavior, on fertility rates?
Right.
I would guess that it would.
It would. If a female's not ready, then that has an impact on for fertility and hatch. And
I would imagine the males then are turning their attention even more to the birds that are ready, and that could be a pretty big load for some of those females to handle. If you get too much attention.
And you don't want over aggression on the males to the females, then that has ramifications down the line on terms of fertility will decline on those females as well.
Yeah.
So
it really illustrates how you might think in the pullet house, well, we were just short a little bit on feeder space. It can't be that big a deal. But it just
it's a compounding impact, and and if we don't have good hatch, then we are not able to place those chicks at the farm, and then ultimately not able to put them on a shackle that can enter into our consumer market. And I mean that's where we're at. I mean, we really need to be able to put birds in transport, and and put that meat where it needs on the table. And so
when it comes to purity, performance, and immunity, High D has been helping layers, broilers, and turkeys stand long for years. As the proven source of pure 25OH D3 for diet fortification, High D is the fastest and most efficient way to provide birds with essential vitamin D. One product, 25 plus years on the market, more than 100 research trials, and 3 billion birds fed per year. There's only one High D. Learn more at dsm.com/HY-D.
Let me ask you this, kind of a side question, but I think it's an interesting part of it. When we think about anything that impacts bird numbers, I go back to when I used to teach a production class and thinking about how far in advance all of these things are scheduled. Breeder flocks scheduled to be placed, and the broiler flocks scheduled to go out and scheduled to be processed. How far ahead of time are they working on some of those things? Because
you think about a pullet flock. I mean, say you're getting eggs at 28 weeks or something like that, but then you got to be on the back end of that about placing orders because there's primary breeders are high demand. So, you could be very, very well a year, 2 years out, really thinking about placing orders. And, with our cockerels, that's getting to be big, particularly, in terms from a primary breeder and having enough, purchase enough that you've got enough, will have enough spike males to go back into that lay flock. And so that's always a big challenge. And then having enough space to house those birds too. So it's something you don't think about. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm trying last year, and it may happen again this year, but trying to explain to friends why, when egg prices were high, they're, well, just produce more eggs. I'm like, you can't just snap your fingers and do that. There's a process that has to happen.
The other thing that we battle with layers is, it started early this year in October or so that, when you deal with high path AI and you lose hens that you normally would have those eggs to enter the market, and we don't have those, then that's, it just puts more pressure on the system. And that was the thing I tried to explain to people because they kept complaining about these $8 eggs and just trying to, just educate people that don't know, what we're dealing with. And at the same time, we were dealing with some high trucking costs. We had some grain prices. It was just a perfect storm. I mean, we had about 4 different factors that were all coming together. And so I was trying to explain all that to people, and it gets kind of challenging, but I think they need to know, and people need to know where the food comes from, and educate people outside, and let them know. I mean, I know that we've seen a lot of the standards about cage free and all that, and some of that's been delayed and so forth. But just trying to meet all of these construction obligations, that kind of thing. So it's some interesting exciting times, and certainly
that's for sure.
I see is the genetic progress with these birds. It's just it's just fascinating just to see, and then at the same time it gives us opportunities that we've really got to step back and say what do we need to be doing different. Another big one that I really feel like's coming moving forward. A couple of things with pullets. One is feed presentation. Is can we get most of this feed out the night before and then lower it down so these birds have access to it, so we're not challenged with some of the opportunities we have now. And then on uniformity, other countries are doing grading. And we're doing some of this a little bit in males now, but if we can grade males, let's say at 4, 8, 12, maybe 16 weeks. So time we move them to the lay house, we've got really good uniformity on males. I think that's probably going to catch on more in the U.S. is grading males. I think that's definitely a need. So.
Interesting. Yeah. Other things that you wanted to share, thinking about the broiler breeder side, because it's such a fascinating topic.
Yeah.
Complicated.
I mean, there's there's many topics that we can talk about, and I don't know how much time we have. So,
Oh, I think we're okay. But yeah, the uniformity side, I think, is it's an interesting concept. And I always enjoyed talking to students about that because there's so many ways you can go with it. You can illustrate aspects of feeding, housing, space, density, all kinds of angles.
And obviously temperature and ventilation is very important with this.
Yeah, that's for sure.
A big one always, we talk about students and management, it's that's kind of one of our central aspects on management is proper ventilation. So, but there are other aspects, and certainly we need to be aware of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you see opportunities? I mean, I'm sure there are, but you may have some more specific things in mind for some precision technologies, as they come along to allow us to be even more precise with what we're trying to do.
Yeah,
especially with
I'll give you
broiler
some
breeders.
Examples. I mean, here recently, I guess probably it was released back in the fall. Having automatic sexers. That's AI technology there. I mean, I do. I think that in terms of housing and in terms of AI, certainly we've got to be able to have sensors that, as data goes to the cloud, that it's accurate. I think that's a big part moving forward. I think that we'll see or out there some machines that can help us grade birds, and particularly on the farm. If the U.S. moves more into grading pullets, I mean, I think there may be some technology opportunities there for us. So I think it's only going. It's just to answer your question, it's going to only increase. I mean, we're going to see more technologies and to help us with these birds, and I think that's something very, very important.
Yeah. I need to go back and take some computer science classes, I think, but it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I realize that, and I think that's where what we're going to have to do is team up with people that's their strength, and we know what we need for efficient production, but how we get there, we may have to interact with more on the, big data, that kind of thing. So I see some opportunities because it seems like we've always operated under silos and integrated operations, and I see more and more that to really tackle big data analysis, it's going to have to go through different, from pullets to breeders to broilers all the way to processing. And, understanding that, I think's a big, big opportunity for us. And, but yeah, it's
all right. Well, I suppose, our time is growing short, but just wanted to extend a thank you again. It's been a great conversation. The whole management side, especially with broiler breeders, have always found it so interesting because there's so many components to it. Well, so many opportunities for improvements, and so many opportunities to make mistakes. That's for sure.
Think about it. But, I guess a feed demand at a feed mill, broiler breeders are only about 15% of the total feed output, but they supply 100% of the broilers, which are the other 85%.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
That's a big part of that. I think it's really that 15% is very, very important. I think it's going to be even more important moving forward as we see now, as genetics change over time and improve. And, we're seeing, roughly about a 45 gram improvement per year to, roughly around 5 pounds in body weight on broilers. We also are seeing about a 0.024 improvement in feed conversion annually every year. And so as we continue that, and, we've seen improvements in livability, we've seen improvements in meat yield. So when you look at all that on the broiler side, it's just going to put, I think, more added pressure on how we manage breeders. And it's just not the same bird it was 5 years ago. And it's all in the details now. And you just got to get it right with the pullets and the breeders to be able to supply these very high performing broilers. And I just kind of amazed that over my career on what I was accustomed to seeing back 25 years ago in terms of broiler performance and what we actually see now is quite incredible.
It is. It's just unbelievable.
And just kudos to the primary breeders on what they've been able to accomplish. I mean, we've had a lot of advancement in poultry housing. So, when you've got the Big Dutchman, the Georgetown, the Cumberlands of the world, and what all they've done, I tell you, with poultry house ventilation has been, and then you can actually feed the bird like it needs to be fed because you've got enough air on the bird, ventilation. You've got a bird that can grow like it needs to, and you put them in the right environment. And now all you got to do is feed the bird right, and you certainly can enjoy a lot of these performance metrics that we're seeing. And I don't think, I think it's a combination of a lot of different segments of our industry coming together to make this a very efficient process.
Yeah, and that's what it takes. It takes everybody working together.
Yeah.
And now I think with technological opportunities, the sky's the limit. Just keep going. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Bill, thank you so much for sharing your time with us again. Yeah. Anytime we have some stuff to discuss, we'll hop on and have some conversations. Yeah, sure. Appreciate it. I'm not going to put you through those, the 3 questions about your favorite resource and all that, because you've answered those before. So anybody out there listening, if you haven't heard Dr. Dozier's responses to those questions, you can go back to his prior podcast and listen in on that. Lots of good stuff in that podcast about nutrition. But for now, we'll say thank you again, and thank you to everybody out there listening. And hope everybody has a great day. Thanks.